Hi everyone. Like I said, my name is Uzo. I'm a BA with the advanced team, and I'm one of the mentors with your group. So I'm sure some of you know me. So I'm going to be talking about business process maps. Just a very quick session. There are loads of material and collateral on prep major on YouTube. So I won't go into detail, but I found that a lot of people is like we're a bit intimidated, unsure with business process maps because of the tools involved and just understanding what the process is. So I just want to bring a little bit of clarity, just to explain, how a little bit, give a bit of insight into how it works, and yeah, hopefully help you get over any hesitation you have of using it. Because whether you're a BA, especially if you're a BA, or an SM, whatever role you have, you're part of a business process. You run into a business process, and to know how it works and how to draw one up, it's a huge feather in your hat and something you can use to sell yourself. So I'm just going to really talk about what a process map is, key features, some quick types, some of the work you need to do before you start it in order to make it easier, because some people just go straight into drawing it. But if you do some prep work before that, you'll sail through tools and tips, and then some useful terms and Q&A. And pay attention, there's a sneak peek question in there, for anyone who is bold enough to answer during the presentation. So basically, I wanted to separate. We talked about process maps all the time, but processes, there are loads of different processes, but I just wanted to focus on a business process map. And a business process basically is just a series of tasks that are related, or activities that are related. They can be done by people, teams of people, a system. So just basically to achieve an organizational goal. And then, so your process map is just a visual model of those activities in the sequence. Is usually a repeatable process, so something that people can identify and then repeat. And then you hear it being called a lot of different things: uh, process map, process flow diagram, workflow, process flow, swim lane diagrams. It's called a lot of different things, but it means the same thing. Now, like I talked about, basically we're talking about a sequence. So it's usually a steps, of activities that people do, or teams do, like I said, or even a system, or is done through a system. But it's usually you input something and you get something out. So you either input data, information, and then you basically get an output. So you input something to get a desired product or an output. So it's like I said, steps. It's very sequential. And then sometimes it's cross-functional. So sometimes it can happen within just one department, and sometimes it can involve a lot of different actors or different functions or different departments within the organization. That's when you say it's not just a basic process. Now it's now cross functional, and then it's measurable. So you can, this is, if you can't measure it, then it's not a process. You have to be able to say, these are the different tasks that are done, these are the performance indicators, these are the metrics that are associated with it. And it's usually used for continuous improvement. So a lot of times businesses want to know, okay, can we identify what this process is? Because when you can do that, then you can know, you know, um, how to improve the process. If there are any pain points associated with the process, is it working well, or are there delays? Is it causing a bit of a bottleneck, within the organization? You just use it to make sure that the process is optimized. So you don't just map it once and say, okay, I'm done with it. It's something that is done iteratively. It's done, continuously. And then, like I said, it has a specific outcome in mind, and it's usually value centric. It's usually customer related, cost effective. There's something people want to get out of it. So there has to be a definite objective. And then, like I said, it's very easy to document. So you can use it to document, you can use it for reference, training, compliance, com- business improvement. And like I mentioned before, it's value centric, usually customer related or stakeholder related. So there are stakeholders that are involved in it and stakeholders that benefit from it. So with these things at the back of your mind, I hope it's giving you a clearer picture of what a process is. There are loads of different kinds. This is just a basic one, just a visual. So you start, end, this is step one, this is a decision, and then step two, and then you end it. If you have to loop around again, you can do that. So some are just very basic. Then some others are a lot more complicated because you now want to kind of drill down to find out, okay, this process, this is the simple process, but I'm sure that there are other processes underneath it. Just to give you a quick example, so we're all looking, some of us are looking for jobs. The process can be you just go online, apply for a job, and then you get a response from HR to say approved, come in for an interview, or sorry, we're not really looking for at this time. So that's a quick process. You do it a lot of different times. Some of us apply like hundreds of times a day. But then underneath that, there's the HR process. So when the HR gets your application, there's something they look for. There's a process they to go through as well. So that's a sub process. So when you kind of want to just do the simple one, you just go straight to apply, yes, no, and then you get your response. That's the end of the process. But when you want to drill down into sub processes, then you now start looking at all the other processes that are linked to all those ones. Your process of registering onto the job application platform, your process of uploading your CV, the process of registering, the process of applying. Then when you apply on the other side as well, there's something that happens and is repeatable. So when you want to capture all of that, you now have to drill down into those processes. Then there's the cross-functional one, like I mentioned. When people want to capture cross-functional processes, you now have to identify all the players. So you're not just talking about, the applicant and then the HR person. What of the manager that is looking for a role? What of the person that needs to sign off on that role? There are loads of different, finance needs to approve, all those sorts of things. There might be a reference, they may need to check your references. There are loads of people that are involved in it. So when you start thinking about different departments and different teams involved in a process, then you come into swim lanes. So just think of a swimming pool, like an Olympic game. Everyone has to be on their lane. If you cross your lane, you're disqualified. So everyone, there's a function that is associated with a particular lane. So that's why it's called swim lanes. When it crosses over, then I'm done with my function. I have to, move it over to someone else's function, and then they have to do something, maybe come back to me, and so on and so forth. So it's just the interplay with all the different functions, who is responsible for what, and how that process goes. So that's the cross-functional one. There's another one that is called CPOC. So you talk about the supplier, you're not talking about an external vendor. What does the supplier do? What's the process? What's the output? What does the stakeholder or the customer get out of it? So that's another kind of process as well. So I'm going really fast because I'm just very conscious of time, but hopefully you're able to capture some of this information. So now, like I mentioned, there's pre-work that you need to do before this, because a lot of people just go and they're like, okay, fine, this is the process. Let me just write it down. Let me capture it. But you have to understand that you may not be the owner of that process, especially as a BA. You may want to capture the process, but you may not really understand the process. So there's some work you have to do before you sit down in front of your, the software to map out the process to make it easier. And what some of those things are is, okay, so you need to identify what those activities are. What do you want to capture? Because there are loads of different processes. So at this particular time, for this process map, what do I want to capture? So you now have to identify what those activities are. Why do I want to capture it? So what's the purpose? That helps you with knowing what it is to capture. So what's the purpose of, this process map? Then a lot of times it's important that you give it a name. When you give something a name, it gives it a bit more clarity. And with names, a lot of times people use verbs. So for example, applying the application process, the registration process, there has to be something like I'm doing something, because remember, is a task, is a action. You're talking about a process. People are doing things. So your name needs to capture what that process is, and it usually helps to start with a verb to make it clear. And then basically you now have to determine what the processes are. Now every process starts with something and ends with something. You have to have a start and an end of that process. And usually the start is called a trigger or the event. So what starts that process? Something has to start it off, so what's the trigger? It's like a gun. I really like, IT roles, because if you hear what it's called, it kind of, the answer is in the name. So what's that trigger? What starts the process and what ends it? So every process has to be connected. Nothing stands on its own. So there's a start and then there's an end. So you have to determine what that is, and then you now go ahead to get information regarding what that process is once you've been able to get clarity on these things. So quick question, based on what I just said, what type of process map would you say this is? Business process map. Anyone can answer. Anyone? Just unmute and answer, because I can't see any hands. So unmute and just give a response if you know what it is.
Is it like education?
Cross-functional. This is a cross-functional.
Fantastic. What other name would you call it? Any other name? Can you see the different functions? And they're in their lanes. So what would you say that is?
Swim lane.
Fantastic. So that's another way. Some people are more comfortable saying, draw me a swim lane. So if in the business place, most people just call it a swim lane diagram. So just so that you can mix both of them together, they may not necessarily call it cross-functional. We're calling it with its real name, but people just call it swim lane most of the time. Now, based on what I just said, very quickly, who can tell me what is missing in this process? Very quickly. Anybody?
A start and end.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I don't know who that is, but you are an awesome student. Thank you. All right. So it's a little quick one. All right. So now, once you've done all of that, okay, so you need to draw up your process. Okay. Sorry, before I get to this, I missed out on something, because once you identify what it is, determine what it is, you need to actually go and get the information. And in order to get the information, you need to talk to the people that are involved in the process. And it's BAs, you recognize this through requirement elicitation. It's the same thing. You can get the information through interviews. Just tell them, okay, so how exactly does this process work? And as they're talking about it, you need to be writing it down. Okay, you need to write all that down, because that's how you determine all those things. Just take notes. Some people actually write out the process, they draw it out on a sheet of paper. It's a lot easier that way. So as they're talking, just be taking notes. And then once they're done taking, once you're done taking the information down, then you can ask questions. Then I'll say, okay, so someone applies, and when I look at the application, I respond. And goes, okay, so how do you respond? Like, okay, if I like the application, then I can, approve it. Okay, what if you don't like the application? What happens then? Oh, if I don't like the application, then I send it to this other place. Okay, so what happens when you send it to that other place? So you just write down all the different steps. Make sure you capture all the different steps, and make sure you ask questions as to, okay, so what happens here? What happens here? What if this is a yes, what happens? If this is a no, what happens? Because that is vital to your process. So like I said, you can get the information from one-on-one interviews, or if you have multiple stakeholders, remember cross-functional, you can have an interview with all of them, or you can have a workshop, or sometimes you can just watch them work, rather than disturb people. Just stay in the background and people are working. It's okay, this person, okay, I have to go and get approval from this person, and then they go and get approval, especially when it comes to a process that is visible. If it's something that is on their system, then it may not be so easily may not be easily observed. But if it's something that they are doing, then you can say, okay, fine, I can observe it. So almost the same way you elicit requirements, that's the same way you get the information for a process map. But you remember, you're just the person creating it. You just have oversight of it. The people are the owners of the process. So you need to confirm from them, is this correct? Like when you finish writing everything down, before you even start drawing it up, this is part of your pre-work. You go back to them and say, is this correct? Like this process, is it right? Like, did I get it right? And they'll say, okay, yeah, it's right. That's fine. That's okay. No, you missed something here. Why don't you add this one? Or you need to talk to this other person to get information. Then you go and get information from that person as well. And then you come back again and say, okay, do I have this correct? Remember, you're writing it down, you're taking down notes. That's the part a lot of people miss. They just go straight into drawing it and you get confused part of the way. But if you write out the steps, all you need to do is put it onto the process map. It's so much easier. So once you've gotten all the information, then you choose your tool. There are loads of different tools available, free, paid, and all of that. But here at Blue Sky, we use the top of the line, and that's Visio. So some people don't like Visio, but trust me, it's one of the best out there, and it's like top of the line. So if you learn with Visio, you can use, Draw.io, Lucidchart, any of the others very easily. And Visio gives you a lot more information. So choose your tools. Then in creating your process map, there's certain symbols that are known. For example, remember we talked about start and stop. There symbols for that. There's symbols for decision. So your decision point, there's a symbol for that. There are loads of different symbols. So you just need to familiarize yourself with it and use it so you're able to create a map and read a map as well. Then remember, I talked about iteration. Now, a lot of people, best practice when it comes to creating a process map, it's important to number, especially if you have a detailed process map, because sometimes the arrows that connect one from the other are really tiny. So it might be difficult for people to know what process goes where. So best practice sometimes is to number the different steps. So 1, 2, 3. Then when you get to a decision point, it can be 1A, 1B. So if you go here, yes, this is what will happen. 2A. If you go no, this is what happens 2B. So it's really, really important. And then another best practice is make sure your connectors are your arrows. Make sure, try and do your best possible, try as much as possible that they don't cross each other, because when they cross each other, then it becomes a bit confusing. So these are just some best practice steps that you can hold, you can use. Now these are, I won't go into all of this, but these are some of the more commonly known or used shapes when it comes to creating your process map. Visio has loads, so it's also good to look through and familiarize yourself with that. Like I said, these are some of the tools. Visio, like I said, is the one we use here, and Visio already has templates ready for you. And so it kind of makes it easier. Loads of different kinds of process maps you can draw, your workflow, cross-functional, all of that. Now, Visio is a Microsoft product. So what they've done, remember I told you about taking notes. What they've done now is that they've integrated Excel with Visio in Office 365. So if you come to your Excel and you fill in the steps, I hope you can see that it's really small, but if you fill in the steps here on an Excel sheet, you can link it to Visio, and Visio will create the process map for you. So that's next level. But please learn how to do the process map, because when you know how to do it, then this is just helping you with the process. And if there are any mistakes, you'll be able to spot it out really quickly. But just to show you that taking down notes before you create the process is actually best practice. It's such best practice that Microsoft has gone to create a format where you can actually type it and just, do that basically with Excel. Some quick tips, like I said, the process owners are the SMEs. So make sure you keep validating with them. Make sure you go back to them to get the information, go back to them to confirm the information, go back to them to finalize the information. They need to approve it and sign off on it as well. I talked about writing the steps out. Some people actually have documents. There are documents that go with it, because remember, you're only putting the information in a box. There's some information that you may not really be able to put in a box. So sometimes you may need to create like a accompanying text to write out some of the complexities, especially when you're talking about a really detailed process map. If it's a simple one, you don't really need it. But if you're creating something a bit more complex, you may need to have like accompanying business process document as well. And then keep it simple. It's one thing to talk about all these things, but just go ahead and start using the product. Open Visio. You can undo. Visio is actually a really great tool to use, but if you're not when you start, it might be a bit finicky, especially if you're using it with your laptop. It's so good to use it with a mouse, because then you have a lot more control. Sometimes the connectors, there are little tips and tricks on how to get the best out of it. And the more you use it, the more you understand how the product works. And something that is a bit frustrating for you at the start will just become, really, really easy. So please open your Visio software tool and start playing around with it. These are some quick terms that we can use. I've used some of them here already, so I won't go into that because of time. I just want to pick some of the ones I haven't used. Now, when you're talking about granularity, if you are working on a process map, it just refers to how detailed do you want to go. There's high level process map that just talks about the basic one. You have mid-level ones that delves a bit deeper. Then you have low level where you actually map out step by step what happens. So when you're creating a process map, it's important to find out how deep, or how much information, how granular do you want me to get? High level, mid level, low level, kind of like thing. Sometimes they'll tell you we just want high level. Then when you go back, they'll tell you, okay, fine, we understand it now. Can you go a bit deeper? Can you like give us a bit more information? We have decision points. So most processes usually have, most processes usually have decision points. So you can either do yes or no. When the answer is yes, it's the diamond decision point. So when there's a yes, if you see a diamond, there has to be a yes and a no.
Okay, whatever. Please, okay, look, I need to go and wash.
Okay, so if you see a decision point, most processes have decision points. It's usually captured using the diamond. And when you see a diamond, there has to be two what do they call it? Two processes that come out from that, a yes or a no. And then most of the time you actually label the line, the connector. So this is the yes flow. If it's a yes, this is what happens. If it's a no, this is what happens. And so that's a decision point. I've talked about activities. Activities are just tasks. So what are the different tasks that are within the process? Then you talk about your trigger. What starts it off? What triggers the event? The process. Then your event can be a trigger. It can be something that changes the process. So your event can either start the process, it can change the direction of a process like a decision point, or it can end your process. So that's what an event is. Swim lanes, that's basically it. Sub process, I've explained that as well. Now the two I want to focus on a bit are the BPMN and the UML. The UML is the Unified Modeling Language. It's usually a set of diagrams, that basically help you capture or visualize a software system. So it's usually object oriented, like it's talking about a system, so this is how a system interacts with an actor. It's usually very basic. It's used for software engineering most of the time, and it's usually object focused. Your BPML is your business process modeling notation. Now that's the one that has a lot of shapes. You can use it for your end-to-end process. You can go deep. You can talk about all the different granularity levels of the process. You talk about your cross-functional, that's your BP, because you're talking about the business process, and that's usually process oriented. So those are the differences within these two. Please go ahead and do some more research regarding it as well. So that's it for me. If you have any other questions, please let me know. But I just wanted to kind of talk through some of the what did they call it? Some of the I just wanted to talk through a bit more about the process. But when you're talking about Visio, I wish I had more. Well, I don't have time, but if you have you need to go to Prep Major or YouTube, and then they're 2-hour-long sessions on the process map. It's really quite interesting. But a way to help yourself as well is, as they're talking about it, open Visio and then just work through something, work through your mentor's kid. Maybe it's a registration process. Maybe just pick a process. It could be anything, and then work through it. And you find that the more you do it, the easier it is. Start simple, and then obviously, you can go into detail the more you practice. So please, that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Uzo. That was fantastic. Thank you. I enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed the first session. Thank you for that. So guys, any one of you have any questions? Yeah, we see your claps. I can't see specifically who is clapping, but somebody's clapping. Okay, great. So who has any questions for Uzo? Please feel free to ask her now. I'll be surprised if I'm not getting any questions from anyone, or even the VAs or anybody.
Yeah. Please, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Please, how do we connect our Excel to Visio? She talked about being able to map out the process in Excel and then connect it to Visio to draw it out for you. How do we do that?
So it's a functionality that comes with Office 365. So a lot of organizations are subscribed to Office 365. If you just have it on your system, you just have the normal Office one most of the time. But then for Office 365, because a lot of organizations subscribe to it, they want to make it easier. It's almost, everyone uses it to map the as is to be process. A lot of people use it. So I've seen it with Office 365. It's not with the one on my system. So I think that might be that particular version. I might be wrong though, so if not, yeah.
So I have Office 365, but I can't find that on
So if you have Office 365, open your Visio or open your Excel. When it goes to new, if you look at your cross-functional flowcharts or your workflow charts, it'll have an Excel icon and ask you to pick, do you want to integrate an Excel file with the Visio you're creating? So it'll ask you. If you don't want to, you just pass it on. Same thing with Excel. If you open it as well, it'll ask you, do you want this particular Excel file to be integrated with your Visio as well? So it's one of these options that you go to when you're starting a new document. But if you don't want to use it, you just, select the other thing. But if you have it, look for it, you'll see it.
Oh, all right, thank you.
No worries.
All right, thank you so much, Emi. Moyo.
Mom.
Hi, Uzo. Thanks for that presentation. You mentioned about the use of BPMN for complex granular business process creation. What I want to understand is there like in comparison to UML, is there a criteria to determine complexity for example, when swim lanes are increasing in number, of course, that shows a bit of too many cross-functional processes. So is there like a number of swim lanes that will now determine that, okay, this is getting too complex, and BPMN will be more ideal?
So your normal cross-functional flow chart is BPML. A lot of the things you get from Visio, which basically says, okay, this is, remember the some of the basic shapes I showed you, some of it. So once you start going into swim lanes and you start going into complexities of the process, you've already gone into BPMN. Your UMI is it's when you're doing your use case and you're talking about the actor and then a system, so how an actor interacts with the system, that's your basic UML. It's just basically unified. It's not really, it's just straightforward. It talks about systems, how the system works with actors. But when you're now talking about, okay, I want to highlight the different functions. Okay, we're talking about HR, we're talking about finance, we're talking about, you've already left UML and you've gone into BPMN. So basically you're now using, you now want to focus on the process. So what's this process? The process can use software. Sometimes it doesn't have to use software. Sometimes you can use email, ServiceNow, like you want to delve deeper into it. So it could be a simple flowchart, it could be a more complex flowchart, but once you go into process mapping, you've gone into BPMN, but don't let the terms confuse you. No one's going to ask you to give me a BPMN, whatever. They just tell you, give me a flowchart. Do you understand? So you're the one to say, okay, there are loads of different functions involved here. I need a swim lane, process map. Or all they want to do now is just they want me to show them how one actor interact or two actors interact with this particular system we want to we want to showcase. Then you just know you want something very simple. So they're not really going to call it their names. I'm highlighting these names so you can put them on your CV and use them for your interviews. That's when these things are very important, because it talks about the fact that you know all the different nuances of the process map. So it's not just I know how to do a process map. No, talk about it. Then when you talk about it, but once you're in the work, like, no, you even hear cross-functional. Don't just tell you, give me a process map, give me a workflow. You're the one to know what to do with it. So don't let the terms confuse you, or don't get bogged down with the terms. That's not what that's for. Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Any other person with any question?
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, go ahead.
No, it was just wanted to find out how to get access to Visio, because I looked and I thought I can't get it on a regular 3651. Is there specific to get it, please?
Okay, yeah, Visio, you have to pay for that. It's not free. It's not that, yeah. So, yeah, I think it costs like is it £15 per month actually for a license anyway. Yeah, so you have to, yeah. So I gave freelancers to the BAs actually. And unfortunately, some of the BAs decided to share my licenses around to people, which is not nice anyway. So it's they use the licenses above what it was meant for. So yeah. So that's the situation where we're in. But yeah, you have to pay, you have to get the license. It's not, yeah, it's not within office actually as well anyway. So it's a specialized license for Visio. Yeah.
Sorry to hear that. Thank you.
Explaining. So yeah, I think the plan, you got one plan for £12.30. There's another basic one for £4.10 anyway. But the one that